Okay, thank you for joining us. This is episode 8 of the Edgar Rice Burroughs podcast. My name is Tim Deforest. I'm the author of a couple of books on pre-digital pop culture, such as old-time radio, classic comic strips, and the pulp magazines that Edgar Rice Burroughs was published in. And joining me are, Jess, go ahead.
Jess Terrell, you would know me from the Facebook discussion group for the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs, where Lil Pop and I talk Edgar Rice Burroughs pretty near 24/7.
And Scott Stewart, freelance writer, ghostwriter, and do some comic book with Randomized Studios. Looking forward to the talk tonight.
Yep, and we are very honored to have a guest with us right now. Chris, can you tell everybody who you are and what you do for a living?
Yeah, this is Christopher Paul Carey. I'm Director of Publishing at Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, and I'm also an author.
Cool. It's awesome. I really appreciate your being here today, especially since you have some big news about upcoming Edgar Rice Burroughs related stuff, right?
Absolutely. You like me to just dive into that?
Just dive into it. Okay.
So some of you probably already know that at Comic-Con International in San Diego, recently, this month, we announced the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe. This is going to be a new series of canonical Edgar Rice Burroughs novels set in Burroughs' worlds, and it's going to be considered canon. So it's going to be true to Edgar Rice Burroughs' original stories and characters and worlds, and we're going to be doing some really exciting stuff with it. There's a through line that runs through the entire series. that we're calling the super arc. So that'll run through. We'll have ultimately probably waves of super arcs, chapters, phases, whatever we're going to call it. We haven't decided yet, but we know what the entire first arc is. And we announced 4 novels in the super arc at Comic-Con. There will be more novels, a few more novels in that before it goes off into new territory. So that's it's going to be Carson of Venus, The Edge of All Worlds by an great author named Matt Betts. That's going to be followed by Tarzan Battle for Pellucidar by Wynne Scott Eckert, another great author. And then after that will be coming John Carter of Mars, Gods of the Forgot by Gary Grayville. He is a fantastic resource for everything Barsoom and Burroughs, honestly. Very, very good with the continuity, as is Wynne. And then I'll be writing a novel following Gary's novel called Victory Harbin Fires of Halo, which is featuring a new heroine in the ERB universe.
Cool, and that is just awesome. I love the concept of the shared universe. The one thing I wish Burroughs had done when he was alive and writing is have a few more crossovers. Tarzan at the Earth's Core is a wonderful book, and I would have loved to have seen him cross over his characters more often. But I'm happy you've got so many great characters doing it. And I have to see, when I read about Tarzan and Pellucidar, and I know he's fighting Nazis down there from what the press release said, that's like I'm just yelling, "Shut up and take my money and give me that book." so
glad to hear it.
Yeah.
I should mention that you can get more information about this at ERB-universe.com. So you can see all that in more detail about those books that I just announced there. Any questions on the ERBU? So, well, let me just talk a little bit more about it. We're also going to be having a canonical comic books. So we've been working very closely with American Mythology, in particular Mike Wolfer, who's the editor-in-chief there. I am the creative director of the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe novels, and he is, the creative director of the ERB comics there at American Mythology, and they've been doing a fine job, really staying true to ERB and having that real ERB flavor and many callbacks to the original canon. So we're going to be putting out a canonical prequel to Matt Betts's Carson of Venus, The Edge of All Worlds, and that will be written by Mike Wolfer, based on a plot by Matt Betts. And then in the back of that, there will be a bonus feature comic that's going to be called Pellucidar, Dark of the Sun, and that's actually going to launch the super arc, and I am writing that. And it's going to star Jason Gridley of Gridley Wave fame, and that character that I mentioned before, Victory Harbin, who's sort of Jason's young protege. So they're both inventors and scientists, and so that's going to be pretty exciting. So the super arc will start in Pellucidar, which goes along with the theme of this episode here. Let's see, we're trying to think of all the details that I want to mention about that, but I don't want to go into too much detail. But if you want to get a little bit of a hint, Jason Gridley has actually made contact through time and space, and he is transmitting from a Twitter feed, which is at Gridley Wave is the Twitter feed. So he was originally struggling because he had to transmit through code. So he started transmitting through binary. So you had to translate it from binary, and then he did a little bit of some other code, and then finally he figured out the system, and there's some direct tweets in English. So exciting times.
Yes.
We were all showing off our binary conversion techniques in my group one night when those messages
when I saw those, I didn't actually try to translate the binary, so they actually do translate into words. Those
yes,
first
they
few
do.
messages.
Yeah, you can
that's
find.
That's just so much fun.
Just Google binary text, and you can find a translator that you can drop all the code into and translate it. So it's pretty fun stuff.
Yeah, that is great fun. So I always wondered if Tarzan would have Wi-Fi at his estate nowadays.
Wi-Fi and maybe Wi-Fi via Gridley waves.
Yeah, who knows?
Go ahead.
Okay, I was just saying that this is just really fun stuff. I love the idea of the interconnected novels, of them respecting canon, so that they I know Win Eckert. At least I know his. I don't know him personally. I know his work, so I know he's a great author. So I know you guys are grabbing people who know what they're doing and respect the source material.
Yeah, so, I have an amazing team working with me on this, and we're really kind of expanding this universe together, you know. And Win Eckert is an expert in chronologies, so he wrote a massive 2-volume set of books called Crossovers, a Secret Chronology of the World, where he documented crossovers from all sorts of media, where one character appears from one series, appears in another series and meets another character, and by extension it's like however many degrees of whatever to create this kind of what he called the crossover universe. And so he comes from a background of this kind of crossover universe building. So he's been a real good resource in this. In fact, his chronology of Edgar Rice Burroughs' books and crossovers within that, it actually served as the backbone for the chronology that I'm building in-house at ERB Inc. To keep track of the canon and make sure all the stories are taking place in the right time periods and things like that. And again, like I said, Gary Gravel, he's an author who he's had several novels out from Del Rey Ballantyne back in the 90s. He also wrote like a novelization of Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, and several other books. And he back before the John Carter movie came out, he actually pitched to ERB Inc. A Barsoom novel, and at that time the rights were tied up, and so he wasn't able to move forward with it. The company wasn't able to do anything with it, so that just kind of went dormant. And when he was already on my radar when I came on board as director of publishing at ERB Inc. And so I queried him about his interest in possibly writing something for us, because I knew he was an ERB expert and a professional author, and he wrote some really, really good novels that I was familiar with. And so he told me about that he had submitted this partial, what we in publishing call a partial, which was a two-chapter, the first two chapters of the novel. So I had him send that to me, and I read it, and it just blew me away. It was so good. It read so much like Burroughs. And that was it. I knew I had to have him, so I got into negotiations with his agent, and I got him. So very pleased to have him on board.
Mm. It's awesome. And I just want to, in general, it's really nice to know that the people running Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated are people who love the work and respect it and treat it with respect. And that's a big deal. And I'm really looking forward to these novels. Yeah,
it's this is really so far the highlight of my career in publishing, being able to work with this material and to bring forth this new series and to work with the canon and all these fantastic authors. So it's just amazing. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of other things in the works at ERB. If you'd like me to go over some of those. We have a new edition of this will be a good tie-in with your podcast, because you had a podcast about this fairly recently, but coming out with our new edition of Tarzan in the Valley of Gold by Fritz Leiber. This is going to be the first hardback edition. There will also be a paperback and an ebook edition to follow. But it's coming out really, really soon. So it's going to debut at the Dum Dum convention, probably on the 2nd. The first is the first day of the Dum Dum, but I'm actually arriving there that evening. Scott, Tracy, Griffin, and I are driving out, so we'll have copies of the books with us. So it probably won't go on sale till the morning. And then shortly thereafter, it will go up for online ordering for the general public. So in early August.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're bringing that back. That's an excellent book.
Yeah, it has a fantastic cover art by Richard Hescox, who ERB fans will know from doing the Del Rey paperback covers in the early 90s for the Venus series by Edgar Rice Burroughs,
cool.
And which were some of my favorites, And then, that's really why, I love those. That's why I wanted to get him on board as one of our artists. And then it's got interior illustrations by an artist named Douglas Klauba, who had done some work for us in the past. He did some of the cover work for the Wild Adventures of ERB series and some of the interiors too. So he turned over some great work. So it's a really, really nice, handsome edition. And we brought on the aforementioned Mike Wolford to do the design work on it. So he's the one who created all the design work for all the logos and things like that for the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe. And we are actually considering this new Tarzan in the Valley of Gold to be part of the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe. So it's kind of classic post-ERB canon. So it's got that branding on it, the ERB universe branding on it. So
there are some pictures of this exciting new cover for Tarzan in the Valley of Gold in my Facebook discussion group for the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yes. Also all over the official ERB Inc. social media. So if you follow our Facebook page and our Twitter feed and things like that. So what else? So we have Scott Tracy Griffin has been working. He's kind of leading up the reprints of ERB's original books. We're tentatively in-house calling it right now the Edgar Rice Burroughs Authorized Library. That's not the official title yet, but it might be. We don't like just calling it the reprint project. So we're actively moving into working on those. So those are, stay tuned. Yeah. That's coming down the pipeline.
Are those the books that Joe Jusko is doing the covers for?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Joe, those of us who got to go to the ECOF convention in Chicago, in Oak Brook, I think
yes.
it was Oak Brook. got to see the originals there on display of the first several. I believe you had for the first 6, I believe, there, and they are absolutely stunning. Especially seeing them in person, just the detail work he did on those. It is just absolutely amazing. These are going to be really, really handsome additions. So he's also doing the frontispieces. So,
Cool.
so we have those coming down the pipes. Go ahead.
Also, if I can interrupt, just to jog your memory, can you want to say anything about Tarzan virtual reality? Oh
yeah, we announced Tarzan VR. The team at Fun Train and Stonepunk Studios at our panel at Comic-Con announced that we're putting. They are working on Tarzan VR, which is coming out in the coming months. So they put up a teaser trailer. So there's you can find them online at tarzanvirtualreality.com. So it's really, really good stuff. You can only see the teaser trailer right now. There's so much more. We've seen a lot more in the office, and it's just amazing. And just some of the concepts that they're working with on it are amazing. Lots of homages to classic ERB and classic even the classic ERB comic books, and they're actually they've been a joy to work with, because at the office we have the team at ERB Inc. We have this long history and in-depth background with the canon, and so they listen to us when we're like, oh, you should mention this in the game or put this in the game, pulling it right from ERB. So you're going to see some lots of little ERB references in there. So it's not just going to be some kind of generic Tarzan,
Cool. Well, that's awesome.
So it's really neat, because you actually get to be Tarzan. I mean, everybody wants to be Tarzan, right? Like that's everybody's childhood dream, and so you get to travel through the jungle and go on quests and things. It's really, really neat.
Yeah.
And I would ask everyone to take a moment. There is a Facebook page devoted to this new product, Tarzan Space VR, I think is the correct typing and spelling on it. Take a moment to go over there and do a like, if you please, to encourage this group of enthused and developers in their fine work. Because what I've seen out of this is totally exciting, very immersive, and is almost like as close as I'll ever be to sailing through the trees. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and it's going to be on all the major VR headsets. So, and it'll also be available through Steam, so the Steam website. So it's really, really exciting to see that out there. On the subject of games, we also have John Carter of Mars role-playing game, which came out earlier this year, and it has been really well received. It's very, very popular and getting rave reviews.
Yeah.
We got to test it out a little bit at the ECOF convention, and really, really pleased with it. I come from an RPG background. Before I worked at Edgar Rice Burroughs Inc., I worked at Paizo, who make the Pathfinder role-playing game and the Starfinder role-playing game. And so I know a good RPG when I see it, and it is fantastic, both in terms of being a great playable fun RPG, and also bringing in that faithful canon. And again, Scott Tracy Griffin was the literary consultant on it, keeping all the canon in line and things, and they've done a fantastic job. Yeah, it's really, really good.
I picked a copy of that up a few weeks ago. I have not had a chance to play it with anybody yet, but it's a great fun system with a fun character creation module and a really innovative way of doing the combat that I think will really be fun when I get to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
that core book for the John Carter of Mars RPG is a beautiful piece of work in itself. Mm-hmm. Gorgeous artwork, very detailed. It's a good reference material if you're wanting to find out more about the characters of Barsoom. And I really would encourage everyone, even if you don't see yourself playing RPG, even if you don't see yourself doing virtual reality, do what you can to pass the great word about these fine products on to your grandchildren or other relatives or friends, and then do what you can to support these. This is a key. Both of these are very key to bringing in more fans and expanding the fan base so that more people know about this wonderful world of Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Absolutely. And it's also, even if you don't play RPGs, it's a great Burroughs reference, honestly. It just has so much of the lore from Barsoom in it, and all the characters and all new art. It's lavishly illustrated. It's just nice to have on your shelf if nothing else, But
it looks great.
And it kind of, okay, go ahead.
I just said it looks great on the shelf. I was agreeing with you.
Yeah. And then tying in with that, we have Will Murray, great author, of the Doc Savage series, and he's done some work for ERB in the past, including Tarzan Return to Polygon and Tarzan versus King Kong is coming out later this year with Tarzan Conqueror of Mars, and I'm actually working on that right now, doing the approvals on it, and it is a rollicking ride. This novel, it's really going to be great, and I'm really happy to see it coming out so soon, because I think a lot of people are probably going to get exposed to John Carter just through the RPG, and now they're going to have this new book that they can read, that will pull in Tarzan into things. So it's really, really well done. It's much better than the now I'm blanking on the title, but the Bloodstone novel, the pastiche that was done, unauthorized pastiche that was done, Tarzan on Mars. So Will is much more faithful to the canon and really, really put a lot of thought into how he wanted to construct the plot for this. So that's going to be coming out probably this fall, I would imagine. And that will be coming out from Altus Press. Cool. So.
Yeah, this is all great stuff. I just hope it just doesn't just satisfy current Burroughs fans. I hope all this helps generate new Edgar Rice Burroughs fans as well.
Yeah, that's the intent, and we just have so much going on. There's a lot more than I can even talk about. But one last Pellucidar thing is, and I can't give any official word on this, but I will say that we are actively looking into the possibility of reprinting Mayhars of Pellucidar by John Eric Holmes, and then having a first authorized edition of Red Axe of Pellucidar, which has never been published in an official manner. It's just kind of circulated in fan circles, the old manuscript. So that is something that we're hoping we can do. So. But no official word on that. I can't commit to it. But just letting you know, we're very interested in that possibility. So some more Pellucidar out there.
One more piece of news, real quick, Chris, while you're with us. Don't mean to dwell on it, but another item I think is worth mentioning is this Deluxe Manuscript Edition, Princess of Mars, coming out of ERBbooks.com. That's ERBbooks.com. One word, ERB Books.
Yes, and that's being produced by Jim Gerlach, and he's, it is actually an Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated book. That is the imprint it is published under. But Jim is really the mastermind behind all of that, and he just puts out the finest quality books imaginable. If you've ever seen any of the others in his ERB series that he's been putting out of these deluxe editions, you will know what I'm talking about. You've never seen books like these before. They're lavishly illustrated with full color plates, some of which are fold out plates. He puts in special sort of reproductions of archival material, like letters from ERB or the publisher and things like that. In the new edition, the Princess of Mars manuscript edition, it's going to have a reproduction of the pen that Edgar Rice Burroughs used to write the manuscript for A Princess of Mars.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and it's going to have
well done box too.
Yeah, it's going to come in as kind of massive case, and it's going to have, in addition to that, also a Deja Thoris coin in antique silver edged in gold. So I mean, it's really amazing stuff that he puts together. And then so many illustrations, so many full color illustrations and black and white illustrations, both from classic artists and modern day artists. It's really, really good. So that you can find that at ERBbooks.com. That's ERBbooks.com. That's where you can pre-order that. So these are collector's editions. These are not, trade editions. So don't be put off when you go look at it. That it's really they're worth the price that you're paying if you're a collector. If you're not a collector, hold on. We're working on the Edgar Rice Burroughs authorized library, which will be coming down the pipe. So
okay.
That's pretty much the big announcements right now. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm happy to try to answer.
It's just all great news. We're really looking forward to it. And once again, I'm just glad that Burroughs' stuff is staying out there where it can find new fans. He's an author that should never be forgotten. He was one of the best storytellers of the 20th century, and we need to remember his works and read them and enjoy them.
Absolutely. Oh, I should mention a couple convention appearances. So I mentioned the Dum Dum coming up August 1st, and we'll have Tarzan of the Valley of Gold there. I will also be at Pulp Fest out in Mars, Pennsylvania, out by Pittsburgh. And I will be on a panel with Tarzan, Conqueror of Mars author Will Murray and Win Scott Eckert, author of one of the new ERBU novels, along with an author named John Browning, and William Patrick Maynard will be moderating that panel. He's the Fu Manchu author, modern Fu Manchu author. And I've decided at the last minute, because I couldn't actually arrange this beforehand because I was keeping all the news top secret about the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe. I have switched my author panel, my author reading to be an Edgar Rice Burroughs universe panel. So I'm slotting that in. The good folks at Pulp Fest have allowed me to do that. So there will be an Edgar Rice Burroughs universe panel, and I will have Matt Betts there, author of Carson of Venus, The Edge of All Worlds, and again Win Scott Eckert, and another author too that is involved in the project that I'm not ready to announce yet, but she will be there. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
Cool.
With the mention of Pulp Fest too, I'd like to throw in an endorsement to you for your work with ERB, because I'm most familiar with you with the Opar and the Philip Jose Farmer work you've done, and your work there has been magnificent. So I have tons of confidence for what you're planning to do and what you can do with Edgar Rice Burroughs material.
Well, thank you very much. That's very, very good to hear, and kind of you to say. Yeah, if I don't know if everyone, I had mentioned I'm an author, so I had also continued Philip Jose Farmer's Kokarsa series, or better known as the Ancient Opar series. So that's what Scott's referring to there.
Well, cool. We just once again we appreciate your joining us here. If you ever have any big news in the future, you're welcome to join us anytime. I understand you weren't going to be able to stay for the bulk of the podcast. You had manuscripts to be reading.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I have to get back to Will Murray's manuscript.
Well, it's for a good cause.
So I won't talk very long.
So
what's that?
I just said I was practicing short sentences so the podcast wouldn't be real long.
Okay.
Okay, maybe a little
long. Well, it's been a pleasure to be on the show. So, I'd love to come back on.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Thank you very much.
Keep the flame alive.
We will.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so lots of great news out there. But we are here tonight to talk about At the Earth's Core, Edgar Rice Burroughs' 1914 novel that introduced the concept of Pellucidar, the world at the Earth's core. You dig down deep enough, you end up in another world with a little miniature sun hanging in the middle, where time works in very weird ways, and where there are dinosaurs. This novel was first serialized in All Story Weekly in 1914. It was published as a book by McClurg, A.C. McClurg Publishers in 1922 with an awesome J. Allen St. John cover. It's been reprinted multiple times since then. Ace Paperback did a great Frazetta cover. There was a Doubleday Science Fiction Book Club edition in 1976 that tied in with the movie and had a photo section of the from the movie in it. And it is just a wonderful novel. And Jess, I believe you were going to summarize the first 5 chapters for us, right?
Indeed. I've got a few things here to say about those first 5 chapters. Let me put in a couple plugs for things here so I don't forget them. A wonderful reference book on all things Pellucidar is entitled The Ghek's Guide to Pellucidar. That's Ghek, G-I-L-A-K, apostrophe S, Ghek's Guide to Pellucidar by David Critchfield. You can find that on eBay sometimes, find it on Amazon sometimes. It's a good go-to manual if you're looking for some quick reference on Pellucidar, as I often am. Of course, the Edgar Rice Burroughs webcomics have a very fine Pellucidar strip. They're always find it very exciting. Tune into that every week. David Ennis' son, Daniel, has an affection for pets. He had a pet Thipdar for a while, and now he's got a pet saber-toothed tiger. So that's always and I also want to make sure I give a shout out to McFarland Publishing, who is working on an anthology this fall that will include Chapter 1 from At the Earth's Core. I've played a small role in all of that, so I want to express gratitude to them. I want to express gratitude to ERB Inc., who authorized some artwork for use in that book. Also gratitude to the artist Tom Floyd, who also provided some artwork.
Cool. Yeah, McFarland published my book, so they're a great publishing house. They do an excellent job.
And indeed, I've got several of their books. They do an extraordinary job, and always a fine publication. Another item, which I believe is still available, there was a desktop model of the Iron Mole from infinity-engine.com. That's one word with a dash in the middle. Infinity-engine.com. They're located in the UK, United Kingdom, and I should warn you that the item arrives not painted, so get your brush out and select some good paints for it. But it's a neat little item, which is a wonderful conversation piece, and you only wish it was bigger so you could ride around in it.
Cool. That's all great stuff.
Moving on to more great stuff with At the Earth's Core, Chapter 1. Well, I think we've all noticed in fiction and in comic books that heroes have to have their vehicle. Batman needs the Batmobile. Wonder Woman has a plane. The Lone Ranger has silver, so he can get around too. David Ennis and Abner Perry have the Iron Mole. That's the machine devised for the journey to the world inside the Earth that we know as Pellucidar. The Iron Mole is a wonder of science and engineering. It's a steel cylinder about 100 feet long, jointed to twist and turn through solid rock. It burrows into the crust using a drill that can generate more power to the cubic inch than any other engine did to the cubic foot. And that's a quote from Burroughs. Abner Perry conceived of a drilling machine to burrow in search of minerals and ore. This mechanical subterranean prospector was Perry's life work. Now, David Ennis was the owner of a mining company. He was intrigued by the notion and by Perry's design, invested heavily in the construction of this full-size prospector, also known as the Iron Mole. Now, neither Perry nor Ennis were inventors. Neither was looking for a world to conquer. Perry was an inventor and a scientist. Ennis was a businessman with a passion for physical fitness, including college days of boxing, football, and baseball. But Perry builds this machine, Ennis backs it financially, so the two of them set off on the first journey inside the Earth, riding along in the Iron Mole. But immediately problems develop on the maiden voyage here in Chapter 1. First thing they do is lose steering, so they can't control the direction they're going. Of constant concern is the exterior temperature, speed, and direction. Running 7 miles per hour, the Iron Mole burrows out of control. And quickly, the basics of air, food, water, and fuel are in short supply. They only have enough to last 3 or 4 days, and they are fearful of becoming stuck 500 miles inside the Earth. And inside the Iron Mole, the noise is deafening as vibrations force our heroes to hold on for dear life. A depth of 700 feet, that's where they realize the steering has failed. 1 mile into the Earth, the exterior temperature is 110 degrees. At 4 miles, the outside temperature rises to 140 degrees. So they're monitoring a number of things here. They're quite busy. And temperature, as well as those vital supplies of air, water, and fuel, are all of constant concern. And if you can't steer where you're going, that's a problem too. After 12 hours, they're 84 miles inside the Earth, and exterior temperature of 150 degrees Fahrenheit. And 500 miles, they come to a stop, and then the real adventure begins. That concludes chapter 1. I promise you short sentences. Chapter 2, entitled The Strange World, the Iron Mole, as I said, has come to a stop, so they open the door and they step out. And I was reading this as we were remembering the moon landing, so it was, gee whiz, deja vu all over again. Once outside, they find breathable air, and David thinks they're on the surface someplace. But for several reasons, Abner Perry questions their position, including the direction they travel, the position of the sun versus their chronometer. Granted, it was a weird and beautiful landscape that they discovered. ERB went into wonderful picturesque description. He described a low and level shore stretched down to a silent sea as far as the eye could reach. The surface of the water was dotted with countless tiny islands, towering barren granite rock, gorgeous trappings of tropical vegetation, magnificent splendor of vivid blooms, poetic description, very colorful. But Perry and Ennis are trying to figure out where they are, so they talk. Perry points out the horizon. He points out the horizon. There's no clear-cut horizontal line marking the dip beyond the line of vision. And we kind of take that for granted here on the surface world, but they're not seeing it way down below. They realize the sun has not moved in 2 hours. And then they spot an elephant-sized bear that is somewhat like a sloth, which forces them all to climb a tree for their own safety. This animal, by the way, is called a drith. That's D-Y-R-Y-T-H for your Pellucidar dictionary. The creature roared, Perry prayed, and then it pulled on the tree, forcing it to bend, presumably so it could get at some of the leaves on the tree. Ennis takes to the ground to distract the brute, whacks it with a branch, and takes off running. While pursuing Ennis, the drith is attacked by a pack of wild dogs, or wolves called hyenodons, perhaps 100 of these wolf-like creatures. Soon they see man-like people with tails who are urging the dog pack to attack the drith. When Ennis regains his feet, some of the wolf dogs take after him. Well, the man-like creatures, the ones with tails, surround Ennis. He notices their large white teeth with long upper canines. They pick at his clothing, discovering the clothing is a separate item from his own body. And the man-like creatures take to the trees, carrying David Ennis along. So he's getting a ride. And we were just discussing the virtual reality, weren't we? So it's that kind of a ride through the trees. Mm-hmm. Chapter 3, entitled Change of Masters. Now, at this point, we've just described what happened to David Ennis. So he's separated from Abner Perry. So here they are in this strange world with these unusual creatures and people with tails sailing through the trees. Ennis travels miles with his captors until they reach a village built high in the trees. And this is where he finds Abner Perry, who apparently was abducted also. Perry reveals, and I quote, "We have made a magnificent discovery, my boy. We have proved that the earth is hollow. We have passed entirely through its crust to the inner world." So Perry recaps the journey that they took in the Iron Mole to get there. It seems that the rotation of the seats, which is something that the mole's interior was designed to do, misled David Ennis. When the seats rotated, he thought that was the ship turning around, but it wasn't turning around. It was still proceeding full steam ahead. So for 250 miles, Perry says that the prospector bore through the crust beneath the surface. It reached a center of gravity of 500 miles, and they had been descending. And at that moment, the seats revolved, which is what confused David Ennis. They passed the center of gravity, and they were really moving upward towards the surface of the inner world. So they made an about face, let's say. Perry points out the sun has been positioned forever overhead. It has yet to move. It's always noon, or has the appearance of always being noon. And Perry speculates that the tailed creatures could be the missing link. Well, these aren't the only possible missing links that they run into there. So after a brief stop at the village where these tailed creatures live, they take another trip through the trees. And Ennis comments and I'm quoting now, "Twice my bearers missed their footing, and my heart ceased beating as we plunged towards instant death among the tangled deadwood beneath. But on both occasions, those lithe, powerful tails reached out and found sustaining branches, nor did either of the creatures loosen their grasp upon me. In fact, it seemed that the incidents were of no greater moment to them than would be the stubbing of one's toe at a street crossing in the outer world." End quote. They stopped at a small valley with a natural circular arena. Perry and Ennis are placed in the center of this arena, facing off against another hyenodon that was described as large as a full-grown mastiff, and that's a huge dog. Here, Ennis's athleticism comes in handy. Now, I'd said before in college he boxed, played football and baseball, so he picks up a rock and throws his best fastball, striking the nose of the hyenodon to shoo it away. After this, some newcomers arrive on the scene. These are a swarm of hairy gorilla men armed with spears, hatchets, and shields. And they overcome the tailed man-like apes. Perry and Ennis are taken by the gorilla men, where they join more prisoners, all chained at the neck. Now, Ennis notes that their companions in chains are a noble-appearing race that did not stumble and stood proudly erect. So these people on the evolutionary scale that they're chained together with, or shall we say a notch above the gorilla-type characters who have taken them a prisoner, and another notch above, looking at the evolutionary scale, another notch above those folks who had tails that flew through the trees. And they were a beautiful race. Ennis says that there's not a face among them that would have appeared plain. The gorilla men guards, who we will learn later are called Sagos, were lighter in build than a gorilla, but mighty with a more human-shaped head. They wore a light tunic that reached the knees, and they had a spoken language. Now, the prisoners, who were in chains, had a different spoken language from the gorilla men. Onward we march into Chapter 4, which is called Diane the Beautiful. Gee, wonder what that's about. Chapter 4 picks up after the chain caravan has stopped for sleep and food. Now, Abner Perry, of course, is a little older, so he gets tired of walking pretty quick. Would be much more comfortable with the book in his laboratory or his machine shop. But David Ennis is enjoying the walk, and he describes the foliage and vegetation. They've entered a mountainous area of virgin granite with crystal streams fed by perpetual snows. Some really picturesque descriptions here in this beautiful jungle, primitive world of Pellucidar. Love the imagery that Burroughs describes. Now, being an ambitious young fellow, David learns enough the language to speak with a young lady who is chained directly ahead of him, linked by 3 feet of chain. She teaches David the language and customs of her tribe, but apparently does not discuss courting rituals, much to his later dismay. Diane Beautiful was the young lady's name, from the tribe of Amaz in the cliffs above the Darrell Az, above the shallow sea. She explains she was running away from Jubal the Ugly One. He's earned his name, by the way, Jubal the Ugly One. Now, David, and Burroughs' heroes are known for being naive, David says, "Why does a woman run away from a man?" It seems Jubal the Ugly One had presented her father with the ultimate trophy, the head of a Tandor, which we would call a mammoth. Let me note here at this point, Back to the Stone Age, possibly my favorite Pellucidar book. In Back to the Stone Age, Von Horst and some of the other characters there were faced with collecting the head of a Tarag, which was a large saber-toothed tiger, in order to show affection or interest in a young lady. So apparently that's the thing to do in Pellucidar. If you have a young lady you wish to court, you need to give her dad the head of some wild beast, which is hard to get. That's certainly the case here that Diane is describing to David. Diane explains that they will be taken by the Sagas, that's those gorilla people I mentioned, to see the Mahars in the city of Putra. Diane explains that the Sagas are the weapons of offense and defense. Races like herself are the hands and the feet. They are all the slaves and servants who do the manual labor for the Mahars. The Mahars are the heads, the brains of the inner world. So that's the chain of command. That's the power structure. The Mahars rule inner world, and the Mahars, we'll learn a little bit more about them shortly, but they are reptilian and are the dominant species there in Pellucidar. Now, also participating in this conversation was Abner Perry. Ghek the Hairy One was there. And occasionally, Hoja the Sly One would make remarks to Diane. Of course, Hoja has ulterior motives. David likened Hoja's looks to having battered himself with a bludgeon. David described the girl as Diane, as magnificent. While on this journey, they see plesiosaurs, giant tortoises, lymphosaurus, who are like a whale with the head of an alligator. Meanwhile, Hoja the Sly One makes his way back to strike up a conversation with Diane. The girl turns her back on Hoja. David decks him with a right to the jaw. Even the Sagas cheered David's gallantry. Next is a crucial moment with Diane, and that's her reaction. Quoting now, this is David Ennis speaking, quoting now. At first, she looked at me with wide, wondering eyes, and then she dropped her head, her face half averted, and a delicate flush suffused her cheek. For a moment, she stood thus in silence, and then her head went high. She turned her back upon me as she had upon Hoja. Some of the prisoners laughed. I saw the face of Ghek the hairy one go very black as he looked at me searchingly, while I could see of Diane's cheek went suddenly from red to white. End quote. After that, Diane had nothing to do with David. Who just shut up? David was totally mystified and immediately missed the girl's friendship. She refuses to have anything to do with him from this point forward. And as soon as they enter a tunnel, David realizes Diane and Hoja are gone. The guards beat the prisoners till they discover the locks have been picked. So Ghek, the hairy one, explains to David how Diane was offended. In short, David did not take or raise her hand. As I said, there was nothing said earlier in their conversation about proper courting rituals. So David didn't know about this, but Diane didn't know that David didn't know. This following explanation here is from Ghek, and I'm quoting once again. When a man of Pellucidar intervenes between another man and the woman the other man would have, the woman belongs to the victor. Diane the Beautiful belongs to you. You should have claimed her or released her. Had you taken her hand, it would have indicated your desire to make her your mate. And had you raised her hand above her head and then dropped it, it would have meant that you did not wish her for a mate and that you released her from all obligation. By doing neither, you have put upon her the greatest affront that a man may put upon a woman. Now she is your slave. No man will take her as mate or may take her honorably until he shall have overcome you in combat. And men do not choose slave women as their mates, at least not the men of Pellucidar. End quote. And David explains that, gee, he just arrived. He's from another world. And Ghek believes him, but the important thing is for Diane to believe him. She's not even there. So that's where chapter 4 ends as they enter the city of Phutra, P-H-U-T-R-A, Phutra. The entrance, let me note that the entrance to Phutra is marked by 2 lofty towers of granite, which guarded the flight of steps leading to the buried city. Sagas were on guard here, as well as 100 or more other towers scattered about over a large plain. And another shout out I meant to give was to Jamie Chase and Bobby Nash, who did a graphic novel, a wonderful graphic novel entitled At Their Score, based on this story. Jamie Chase has done an outstanding artwork depicting many of these scenes, bringing them to life with this very unique style. And one of those scenes is this troop of prisoners entering this city of Phutra that belongs to the Mahars. So if you're not familiar with that book, At Their Score by Nash and Chase, I highly recommend it. Pick up a copy.
I'll just jump in here to second that. That is an excellent book. Chase's artwork has this rawness to it that really gives Pellucidar the sort of primitive feel it needs to have. And it's just it's a magnificent book to look at, and it's a very faithful adaptation of the novel.
That's well said. I like the word rawness. I think you nailed it. I've been saying stark, but I'm going to switch to saying rawness. It's a unique, what I would call a unique style, but it is super well done. I'm a big fan of his work. I'm a big fan of several people's work. Certainly enjoy his work, and I've got one of his Pellucidar pieces hanging here, in fact. But not that one, although it's on my shopping list. Moving to chapter 5, entitled Slaves. This is David's first look at the Mahars, whom he'll become better acquainted with as the story moves along. He says, and I quote, "A more hideous thing it would have been impossible to imagine. The all-powerful Mahars of Pellucidar, a great reptile, 6 or 8 feet in length, large narrow heads, and great round eyes. Their beak-like mouths are lined with sharp white fangs, and the backs of their huge lizard bodies are serrated into bony ridges from their necks to the end of their long tails. Their feet are equipped with 3 webbed toes, while from the forefront membranous wings, which are attached to their bodies just in front of the hind legs, protrude at an angle of 45 degrees towards the rear, ending in sharp points several feet above their bodies. And I would, end quote, and I would reference, there are several pieces of artwork devoted to, in addition to Mr. Chase's artwork devoted to Pellucidar and Abner's core, but certainly comes to mind the drawing by Frazetta, where there's 2 drawings of a Mahar with a young lady victim, and one of these drawings offers a good look at the back of the Mahars, just as exactly there as Burroughs described.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at that at the moment. It's the copy of the book I had out here while we're doing the podcast. It was an ace paperback from the 70s, and it is just a superb cover.
Right. It is. It's very chilling. If you can get a look at a bigger, I mean, it's chilling on the paperback.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a look at a bigger version of the image, you can see more of the wondrous detail. That shows, that particular picture shows the arena, and there's some other Mahars sitting up there in that what amounts to indoor natural arena or amphitheater, and the Mahars are watching the show, and that I think is just a very chilling scene. And now, when Abner Perry looked at the Mahar for the first time, he identified the scientific name, so forgive me if I mishandle this, Rhamphorhynchus of the Middle Oolitic era. But gad, how enormous, Abner Perry went on to say. The largest remains we've ever discovered have never indicated a size greater than that attained by an ordinary crow. So this is much, much larger down in Pellucidar, and intelligent and able to communicate, and dare I forget to say, has a hypnotic control over its victims, which is how it manipulates those the Sagas, the gorilla people, and the victims are right before dinner time. Now, Phutra, by the way, is an underground city marked by 2 towers. The entrance, we talked about that. Engineering marvel cut from solid rock. Streets are wide, 20 feet high. Tubes pierce the roof, because it's underground, subterranean. Tubes pierce the roof to provide air and light. In the city of Phutra, they see thousands of Mahars. So there's an ample supply of Mahars. Also, more Mahar details here. They have no ears. Stakeouts communicate with them using a sign language. So David, Abner, and Ghek are put to work in the archives, moving and arranging ancient text. The 3 talk about escaping. David and Abner make iron swords and bows and arrows. Hoja is recaptured, but Diane remains free. That's Hoja is David realizes that he feels more than friendship for Diane. Abner suggests that Pellucidar has a greater land area than the surface world. David and Abner ask Ghek to escape with them and help search for Diane. Agreeable, Ghek explains that the Pellucidarian homing instinct is how he gets around. Now, this again is unique to the Pellucidar, the residents of Pellucidar, where of course they can't really look at the sun or the stars to determine the location or distance, because there are no stars. It's forever daylight there, and the sun is not moving. It's always at high noon, that position, highest in the sky. But the Pellucidarians are somewhat like a homing pigeon. They are born with an inherent homing instinct, so they can always get back to their home country where they came from. They just know where to go to. They're talking about how to escape. David locates 3 sleeping Mahars and plans to kill them as part of their escape. Now, Abner Perry, who has learned to read the Mahar text, relates that the Mahars are all female, fertilizing their eggs chemically. The secret of his chemical is hidden near where the 3 Mahars sleep. Abner wants to steal the secret to help the human race. Ghek agrees to the escape plan, but because of the Mahars' position as the dominant race, Perry raises the ethical question of murder if they were to attack the Mahars while they sleep. And furthermore, this secret as to how the Mahars reproduce, there's some thought about weaponizing that to eliminate the Mahar race. Again, the question is that ethical. So David ends discussion proclaiming he'll become a murderer and kill these 3 Mahars so they can get out of there. And Ghek, the hairy one, expresses concern for their fate if they are caught. And that's the end of chapter 5.
Yeah, and the comments I wanted to make about those early chapters is Burroughs is always a master of pacing. His books always move along very quickly, but he's still able to give us all the exposition we need at the same time. And At the Earth's Core might be like the best example of that, because it's very quickly he tells us who David is, who Abner is, what the Iron Ball is, without wasting any time at all, and gets them started on their adventure within just a few pages. And it's just a remarkably skillful storytelling, as his ability to give us the information we need to follow the story and know who the characters are without slowing up the action at all. And the first chapter of At the Earth's Core is a prime example of that.
Yes, it gets that story going quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just jumps right off. I should mention, it was my fault. I didn't include the prologue on the outline I sent to you guys. There is a prologue where David has returned to the surface in the Iron Mole, and he meets Edgar Rice Burroughs in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And so this is David telling Edgar Rice Burroughs his adventures. And that's the framing sequence. There'll be more about with Burroughs at the end. And that was a common thing for Burroughs to do. He was John Carter's nephew, so he got stories right from John Carter's mouth. Or he knew a guy who knew a guy who knew Tarzan, so he had a conduit for information there. So if when you're pretending that the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe is real, it's like, well, he wasn't that great a writer. He just happened to know everybody. So
he was good telling the stories, no question about that.
Yes, I know he was a superb, but he often used that framing sequence to say, I met David Enos personally, here's his story. And it was always a neat thing, and I think it helped make his universe a coherent one. And I will also note how David is going to be having trouble navigating when he's outside, when he escapes from the city, because there are no stars or the sun doesn't move, and he can't figure out how to find himself around. The Tarzan, of all people, has the same problem in the later novel when he visits Pellucidar. Probably the only time Tarzan is ever actually lost in the jungle was when he was in Pellucidar, because all the things that he even subconsciously used to know where he was doesn't exist there.
Yeah. That's a great point. That's the reason I was laughing. That put a little new spin on Tarzan's challenges to overcome.
Yeah, that's somebody who's not used to being lost. So Scott, you were going to do the chapters 6 through 10?
Yeah, and some of the comments I'm going to save, because if we get to where we're talking about both the movie adaptation and the graphic novel adaptations, I'm going to do this more with a linear read about it, and then save those comments for comparison later on.
Okay.
This was a great opportunity to open up the edition I got last year from Chanel Gray when they released the 100-year art celebration of Tarzan, and they released several of the novels, including the Frazetta one with the Mayar and the lady on the cover at the Earth's Core. And I must say it was a real pleasure to read through with their typeset and formatting on this book. And it was a lot of fun. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I second that. That's an excellent set of the Tarzan chronology, a 4-volume set. It's really superb.
Yeah, and then they also offered several of the Edgar Rice Burroughs novels released in a hardback with just a beautiful production printing job on it too.
Cool.
So I got the Earth's Core here, beginning with chapter 6. Now, Ghek and Abner and David are now sharing prison life together, and 6 actually starts with them being jostled off to what is an arena in which they're going to see they're not sure what they're going to see at first, but they see about 3/4 of the arena around the sides are filled with the prisoners or the humans. And then there are these boulders in this area set up, and the Mayars come in there, and they go up upon these boulders and sit, sort of like special seats in the auditorium. And the Sagoths are there to help guard the prisoners that are there for this. And it's actually like an old gladiator show that we consider from ancient Rome. And they bring two prisoners in there, a male and a female who had ran away. And David is worried that the girl might be Diane. And it turns out she isn't. So part of that is built with the tension. Is it her or is it not? Till he gets a good, clear look at her. And what's released into the arena are two giant creatures. One is a boss, it's spelled B-O-S. I'll call it boss, or it could be boss. But it's like a giant bull, a giant ox or giant bull. And the other one is like a large tiger or saber-tooth type tiger that comes in. And one from each end. And each of the contestants in there, if you want to call them contestants, but are each given a spear that they're able to fight with the animals. Well, the animals come charging in, and the male grabs the female and jerks her off to his side, which the animals don't move quick enough and run into each other, and thereupon start tearing into each other and fighting each other. The bull has his horns and his massive weight going against there, and the cat is, when it's being held down, still has its legs free and is just biting and scratching at the bull and tearing out his face and his eyes at the same time. The bull, in the course of the fight, kills the giant tiger, and now in his rage and being blinded, takes off and ends up jumping over a barrier and landing across the wall and into the audience and breaking through the area there. So everyone starts panicking and taking off. This turns out to be the perfect time for David to escape from there in the panic. He goes into a tunnel and finds his way through the tunnel. Oh, first off, before I get there, there's a section I wanted to read that isn't so much about the fight itself, but Edgar Rice Burroughs brings us both his description and at the end of this paragraph, a bit of his dry humor where David is narrating what's happening here, because just like we might have pre-game or mid-game ceremonies in a football stadium or other place, they have an opening act here, which I guess you could call it a musical act, but since the mayors do not have ears, I find this a really great description here. And then the music started, music without sound. The Mahars cannot hear, so the drums and fifes and horns of earthly bands are unknown among them. The band consists of a score or more of Mahars. It filed out in the center of the arena where the creatures upon the rocks might see it. And there they performed for 15 or 20 minutes. Their technique consisted in waving their tails and moving their heads in a regular succession of measured moments, resulting in a cadence which evidently pleased the eye of the Mahar, as the cadence of our own instrumental music pleases our ears. Sometimes the band took measured steps in unison to one side or the other, or backwards and again forward. It all seemed very silly and meaningless to me, but at the end of the first piece, Mahars upon the rocks showed the first indications of enthusiasm that I'd seen displayed by the dominant rays of Pellucidar. They beat their great wings up and down and smote their rocky perches with their mighty tails until the ground shook. Then the band started another piece, and all was again as silent as the grave. That was one great beauty about Mahar music. If you didn't happen to like a piece that was being played, all you had to do was shut your eyes.
That is
so a little bit of that dry humor in there, but for not being an action sequence, if you want to talk about being a fight sequence or a tense sequence of life and death moments, I think his description there is very interesting and well done. And the idea of music without sound, and as we would call it, a choreograph or a dance sequence, more or less, but that was their form of music. And it just shows his imagination taking that level to show that here they're intelligent enough to have a celebration or an opening ceremony to start I guess, what they'd consider festivities, but the prisoners
Yeah.
aren't viewing it with much.
I think it also serves a purpose in showing how alien the Mahars are compared to humans. That they're just real. There's just no. They're not a metaphor for humans in any way, shape, or form. They are a completely alien species.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it's
that
very
brings-
telling to realize they're the ones in charge too.
Yeah.
Yep. And that brings us into chapter 7, in which he does escape from the amphitheater, and he finds a tunnel he gets through. One thing I liked about this, because it can happen in lots of stories, people find these tunnels in their caves and they take off running, and how they get away with this or that, where he does slow it down just a bit, not the pacing so much, but takes a little time to describe that David hits the darkness, realizes he can't see anything, so he decides he only has one choice. If he goes back, he's going to be captured or maybe killed, to follow the tunnel as best he can, slowly moving along and feeling sides of the walls till he does find the skylight. And we've talked about it in other books too, where they've had the caves when, land out of time, where people that time forgot that area, where they crawl, and it's not an easy journey, and it is dark. They don't just. He does have the coincidence where they always seem to find some light and get out, but it's not necessarily super easy. Mm-hmm. So he does get out of the cave there and starts going through the foothills and going through the forest and the lands they have there. And I'm going to read another segment here. This will be the last one I read. But I like, again, here how Edgar Rice Burroughs brings both a description of the environment, the elements that the character is in, but at the same time allows the character to ruminate or think and provide answers to us about why things are in this world, instead of just being an exposition paragraph someplace saying, now as David walked along, we can tell that he knew this and that, but it flows in a much natural way. So as he's going through here, it says, rank grass, waist high, grows upon the plains of Putra, the gorgeous flowering grass of the inner world, each particular blade of which is tipped with a tiny five-pointed blossom, brilliant little stars of varying colors that twinkle in the green foliage to add still another charm to the weird yet lovely landscape. But then the only aspect which attracted me was the distant hills in which I hoped to find sanctuary. And so I hastened on, trampling the myriad beauties beneath my hurrying feet. Perry says that the force of gravity is less upon the surface of the inner world than upon that of the outset. He explained it all to me at once, but I was never particularly brilliant in such matters, and so most of it has escaped me. As I recall it, the difference is due in some part of the counter-attraction of that portion of the Earth's crust directly opposite the spot upon the face of Pellucidar at which one's calculations are being made. Be that as it may, it always seemed to me that I moved with greater speed and agility within Pellucidar than upon the outer surface. There was a certain airy lightness of step that was most pleasing, and a feeling of bodily detachment which I can only compare with that occasionally experienced in dreams. Well, I like this, and this is similar to John Carter on Mars and other areas where, and other parts of the book here where he talks about time or time not existing, because we don't have, the people there don't fall under the same rotational laws of the sun and moon and gravity that we do on the outer world, or the lesser weight on Barsoom for John Carter to have extra strengths. He'll do this in his adventures where he'll give a, let's say, a semi-street physics to explain what things are, and it's just, that's the way things are, that's what's accepted for the story, instead of several pages of what people who love true science fiction would say is missing. He gives a story, he gives a possible explanation for it, and then moves on and considers that to be part of the foundation. I appreciate that, like that a lot.
He establishes an internal logic for why it works like this. Doesn't worry about whether it matches real science and just runs with it.
Exactly. Exactly. So he spends several days actually eating and sleeping till he gets to what he calls an inland sea, and he can see islands far out of it, and finds a dugout, a canoe. And as he's getting ready to, as he's standing there wondering exactly what to do, a man comes running with a spear. So he figures, well, I'm going to get away, get out in the water with this canoe. That's the best thing I can do. Throw a spear, and it slightly wounds him embedded in the canoe, the dugout. And he takes the water to get away. The man continues to pursue him, swimming faster than he can actually paddle, so he's catching up to him. And just as he gets to a dugout, suddenly this like sea serpent comes out and grabs the guy who is chasing him. He watches it for a while, thinks that there's a distraction where he can actually get away, and then realizes this is another man. To him, it's another man. He can't just let him die. So he proceeds to attack it with the spear, wounds the creature, and the man who is coiled up by the creature is able to help with the spear and help him get a balance or hold on it. And the serpent does die. Then they're both in the boat looking at each other and holding on to the spear and staring at each other for some time, wondering what's going on. The language the man uses, David doesn't understand at first, but then he uses language he kind of learned when he's captured and walking with the Sagouts and talking with Diane. And at this time, the man does understand it and introduces his name. It's spelled J-A, so I'm going to say Ja. Could be J or Ya or Ye. I'm going to say Ja. And it says he's a Mesop and that he's part of the island people there. And he takes him to the without much more event until they get there, except they hide the canoe because he says there are other Mesops who are like pirates, who we would call pirates, who are warring tribes and would steal the boats and maybe try and track them down. And as they go through the jungle to this man's village, they go and the path seems to end. And he double backs on the path and then walks again to another place and goes through the trees. And after a little ways, they find another path that goes back towards a direction that looks like back to the water again, though they're in the jungle. And they go up through a maze of these paths where he'll walk down and back several, maybe even a mile. It's kind of like shuffling his feet around. So it makes the tracks look very, very messed up. And they get through, and then there's a point at first where it climbs through the trees. And another path gives them a path to their village that they can follow for those who are growing up there, but will very much confuse anyone who might be an invader or someone trying to track them down. And David marvels at this, the intelligence that they had to do this as a protective part. They finally come to a clearing in the jungle, and it's the village. He finds out that Ja is the chief of the village, and he considers him to also be a protector of David because David saved his life with the sea serpent. David tells him about his adventures, tries to explain where he's from, also that he wants to know more about the Mahars because he also wants to help his friends. And there happens to be a temple on this island that the tribe built for the Mahars. So they have a deal with them. They supply fish and other things for food, but they also help build this temple so that the Mahars don't take or kidnap them or sacrifice them. And he sneaks David into the temple so they can watch what's going on, which basically no one has seen before. And inside there, first he sees our little islands in this pool of water, like stone or concrete islands, that humans are on there, male and female, and children, women and children. And then the Mahars come flocking in along with pterodactyls, which are pterodactyls, I guess, I don't know if you want to call them their pets. They're very similar. They're all of some sort. The Mahars and the pterodactyls are pterosauruses, or part of the pterodon family in one way or another. But the pterodactyls seem to be more like we might have a dog walking with us. And during this time, they're watching from a concealed area in this temple, and they do a mind control hypnotism over first a young lady, and she walks in the water, and it's almost like a dance, how he describes it, a very diabolical dance. And at which point where the water gets deeper and deeper, and the Mahar goes underwater, and she goes underwater, and they come up a couple times, and then finally it comes up, and she doesn't come up, and like her arm or her legs in the Mahar's beak, jaws, beak, whatever you want to call it. And David realizes they're here. These are sacrifices. They're going to eat them. And this is the queen who comes in the water and has her first dance of death and eating, if you want to call it. And when she's done, she goes back up on a rock, and then all the other ones, Mahars, come in there and do the same thing with individuals they pick out. And then at the end, the only ones left on the concrete are men. And then all the Mahars rest and they're full and like go to sleep, and the pterodactyls then go down and rip them apart and eat them, sort of like wild dogs might attack a deer or something. During this part, he ends up breaking through the weak wall and falling into the water. But since they don't have ears, they don't notice him with all the other mayhem going on there. And he stays underwater for a very long time. When he comes up, he's afraid of coming up from water. He keeps staying under there. He comes up, they're all gone. And Jaw's gone too. Then he starts wondering, how long was he underwater? Was it a minute, an hour, a day? Because he's realizing time is different in Pellucidar, and all he knows is it's empty. And he does manage to find his way out, and he gets in the jungle. He does not have any idea how to get back to the village. From there, he does make his way back to the beach and finds another dugout or canoe, and heads back to the mainland again. Let me make sure where I'm at here. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like that seed with the Mahars feeding. I have to say, and this, I hope this doesn't sound like a criticism because it's actually a strength. It's one of the most gruesome things that Edgar Rice Burroughs put in any of his books, I think. It really is quite horrific, but I think it needs to be, because the Mahars have to be presented as like these totally evil beings that need to be wiped out for the human beings to be able to ever exist. Earlier, Abner was bringing up, moral questions about are we allowed to kill them or not. I think Burroughs was trying to present them as so thoroughly evil and inimical to humans that there was no choice but to destroy them.
And he's done that in several other stories and books too. He definitely, along with the shades of gray, if you want to call it, of life and death and how some characters are, his villains usually are really, really, really evil villains. Regardless of which character it is and which race is being fought on which land, island, which world, wherever it is. And that's what he does here. These are supposedly very intelligent beings, and they are, because there are scientific experiments going on and the things they've created for the chemical birth
fertilization
production and stuff. But they look like monsters, and they're more evil than what they look like. Let me get on here then. That'll bring us up into I went through 8 and up to 9 now too. He gets into he does make it to the mainland, and he's trying to find Futra to get there. And he basically does kind of like what I can tell in the narration, like a semicircle, and ends up on the beach again. And while he's on the beach, then a creature like similar to a giant alligator or crocodile comes rushing at him, and he hears a voice, and Jaw is actually back on the mainland too. And he climbs part way down to help him up by handing him a spear to try and drag him up, but he ends up using the spear to kill this beast, and then getting back up and meeting Jaw back up onto the cliff. And so they are able to meet and talk a little bit again while there. And again, because of time in Pellucidar, we don't know if this has been 1 day or 2 weeks. The chances are it hasn't been 1 day because of the coincidence of the travel and them both coming to this spot there. Well, we do know there's been some time because David talks about having several meals and several nights of sleeping on through his walk in the area there. He wants to go back though to continue to Futra, and Jah does not want to go into Futra with him, so he gives him a little lead and a little help on that way, but he says, I can't go into that city with you. And David gets closer to it, and then he sees some Sagoths there. And they see him, and they start making noises and like shaking their spears or whatever, as if they're kill the escaped prisoner. But he walks up to them, and like nothing's going on, like like it's just a day in the park, which catches them off guard because they're looking around going, why isn't he running away? He gets up there, and he's able to, in their rough language, say, oh, I want to come back here for safety. And they're like, are you nuts? And he goes, I was being fed, and I was with people I know there. I don't know what I'm doing out in the jungle. So they take him in and take him to I don't know if you'd call it guardian Mayar or one of the decision maker Mayar to talk. And then he goes on the idea that Mayar goes, you actually gave yourself up. And he's like, yes, and this is why. He says, on our world, even when you're a prisoner, the victor of the prisoner or the winning army will show you mercy and take you in to work with you. He goes, naked and alone out in jungle with those beasts and no weapons, what choice did I have? Here, I at least have an intelligent race and food. And he tried to explain. He says, in the world I come from, and explains this outer world. And the Mayar is like, that sounds pretty goofy to me. That's a paraphrase. And so does the Sagoth, who's standing by him, guarding him. And he turns to him to ask him about it. And the guy says, you better tell him the truth. He says, I am telling the truth. He says, well, if you don't tell the truth, they're going to kill you. He says, I am telling you the truth. And the Mayar tells him then to take him to one of the cells, or in the movie. This is one comment I'm making. In the movie and in the graphic novels, some of the stuff looks actually more like cave work and labyrinth work and stuff. But in the book, you refer to them as apartments or offices that they're going to. And he ends up being reunited there with Abner, is there at that point. And shortly after he's there, another guard comes to take him and say, you're being summoned now. You're going in front of a bunch of the Mayars, not just the one. You're going in front of the council. And he and Perry say goodbye, and Perry's afraid of losing him and says he can't picture not being without him. But he also didn't realize that David Innes had been probably awake for 2 or 3 weeks, because time becomes like a relative thing. He's been working on these books in this library and trying to decipher things. And it seems like when you're concentrating on one action there, time is different than if you're actually active or in motion or traveling. It's an interesting concept ERB brings into that. But at this point, he's being summoned before the council, and I'll turn that over to Chapter 11, to Tim.
Yep. I will mention that the reason that David was going back to the Mayhir city to turn himself in was he felt a moral obligation to get back to Perry and escape with him. And
Diane, too. He's in love with her.
Yes. And so the plan they had come up with earlier was to kill these 3 sleeping Mayhirs and skin them and wear the Mayhir skins as disguises to get out of the city. David and Abner and Ghek would be able to get away this way. Over the course of Chapter 10, he gets a chance to kill those Mayhirs. Because of the difference in how time flows, the sleeping Mayhirs he had seen before his escape are still taking their nap. For them, almost no time has gone by. But things go a little awry. He ends up having to fight and kill a 4th Mayhir, which proves to be kind of convenient because Hoja, the sly one, shows up and insists on being taken along. So the spare Mayhir skin is something they need to get all 4 of them out. None of them trust Hoja, but they've really got no choice but to take them along. They use the Mayhir skins as disguises to get out of the city. Hoja disappears at some point, and Abner, Ghek, and David are pursued by Sagos. David breaks off from the other two in order to lead the Sagos away to give them a chance. There's a magnificent action scene where David runs into a cave bear who ends up attacking the Sagos and killing all or most of them, and gives David a chance to get away. He finds kind of an isolated little valley, I think it was, where he finds Dion the Beautiful staying. So there, he's finally reunited with the lady that he has come to realize he's in love with. But she's still treating him disdainfully because of his initial misunderstanding of how things work between men and women on Pellucidar. But she's stuck in the valley with him. She's, say, well, as long as you've got to be here, I guess I got to put up with you. But she can't go back to her home village because she doesn't want to be taken as a mate by Jubal, the ugly one. But Jubal's been out looking for her, finds her in the valley, so David has to fight Jubal in a hand-to-hand combat. It's another magnificent fight scene. Burroughs was great at fight scenes. And David manages to kill Jubal. Diane claims that she still can't go home because Jubal's brothers and cousins will then take her. So they spend some time together in this valley. Eventually, they admit that they're in love with each other. And Diane admits that she made up the stuff about the brothers and cousins and that she can go home now because she just wanted to keep David around until she could be sure that he was really in love with her. So they mate. They get married, but just by announcing that they're husband and wife. There's obviously no legalities there. And they eventually manage to reconnect with Ghek and Ja and Abner. And in the meantime, David has come up with the idea of using some poison snakes as a source of poison to make poison bow and arrows, and to teach the Pellucidar humans how to use these weapons and to be able to stand a chance in a war against the Sagos and the Mahars. And the idea is to unite some of the tribes, form an empire, and overthrow the Mahar tyranny and give freedom to the humans. They actually have a battle where they win and they capture a Mahar, destroy many Mahars and Sagos. They also decide that David needs to take the iron mole back up to the surface to get weapons and other advanced technology that they can use in the continuing war against the Mahars. He plans to take Diane with him, but Hoja, the sly one, manages to slip a Mahar wrapped in a cloak into the iron mole. So he goes back to the surface thinking that his girlfriend was with him, when it's really, this pterodactyl-like telepathic monster, which means that David is just as unobservant about the woman he loves as any other guy. The iron mole, because of the mounting they had put it on, cracks a little. It does not go straight back up to the U.S. where they had originated. It ends up in the middle of the Sahara Desert, where David is just stuck out in the middle of nowhere until Edgar Rice Burroughs on a hunting vacation happens by. So Burroughs helps supply him with the stuff he needs. And David intends to go back down and string a telegraph wire behind him. But the book ends with Burroughs uncertain whether David got back or whether he was attacked by Arab bandits before he had a chance. Because of sandstorms and such, Burroughs is not able to find the location where he had left David originally. So the book ends with an uncertainty as to whether or not David got back to Pellucidar or not. Readers in 1914 had to wait a few months for the sequel, Pellucidar, to come out to discover that David does get back and has continuing adventures there. So it's just a great end to a great novel. I think Pellucidar is one of Edgar Rice Burroughs' just a magnificent example of his world building. He does build a world that makes sense according to the internal logic of the story. He comes up with a great culture for the humans. He comes up with magnificent villains in the Mahars and a culture that makes sense for them. The whole world makes sense. It's a place that you can believe really exists while you're reading this story. And it's full of just wonderful, exciting action scenes.
I'd like to add on there too, when we were talking about the Mayars being so evil, when he is brought back to council and they don't believe him, they sentence him to the pits, where when he's chained down there, he sees that they're experimenting on humans and cutting them open while they're completely awake, no anesthetics or anything, and checking the organs or whatever it is they're doing the tests there. So, yeah, very evil, horrifying, inhumane, yes, treatment.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting that Burroughs had Abner play the moral check on everybody. Do we have the right to kill Mayars that are intelligent beings? But then made sure we knew that just how completely evil they were, so there was a moral justification to fighting a war against them.
Yes.
Back to a point you made earlier, which got me to thinking, which is always dangerous. Guys are notorious. Menfolk, me too, are notorious for failing to notice the significant others. New dress, new hairstyle, new whatever. Well, Burroughs provided us with the perfect out. We can always point to David Ennis and say, "Look what he did. He didn't know his girlfriend or his wife there had been replaced by a hideous reptilian monster." Because that's nothing compared. What I've done is nothing compared to that.
Yeah, I got to remember that one. Because I've already done that once with Angela. She had her hair done, and it was like, it's different. Okay, so that's a good thing to keep in mind. So, yeah. Any more comments about At the Earth's Core, the novel? Because I'd like us to talk about the 1976 movie for a few minutes.
Well, certainly At the Earth's Core is one of my favorites, no question about that. Mayars, as you so well said, are a very perfect villain. Mm-hmm. They pop up again elsewhere in some of the Pellucidar books, and they had new life in the ERB web comics, and they've appeared in some of the graphic novels and Sunday comic strips. They're always a good villain, and one that's really tough to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pterodactyls with mind control are just are kind of hard to beat. But there was a movie made in 1976, one of 3 movies made in England. They made At the Earth's Core, or At the Earth's Core was the second one. They had made Land That Time Forgot, then At the Earth's Core, then they went back to make People of Time Forgot. All 3 movies starred Doug McClure. Yeah, and in this one he's David Ennis. The best casting in almost any movie ever is Peter Cushing as Abner Perry. He is just so delightful in that movie.
Totally. I hear Abner Perry. I hear Peter Cushing's voice every time I read this book. Mm-hmm. Voice is Abner Perry. He just nails that character. Of course, he was already well established, working for Hammer Films for so many years, and had played a number of wonderful characters, including Sherlock Holmes in a film, and it's here he establishes the character of Abner Perry, and then 2 years after this, maybe 3 years after this, he comes back and does the Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars.
Yeah, he was great. He was a total pro as an actor, and you could give him a good guy role or a bad guy role, and he would nail that part every time.
He's one of those actors whose voices I've always admired. I just love to hear you speak. It's always so elegant, precise, and exact.
Yeah. And apparently, from what I've read, a total gentleman and one of the nicest people in the world in real life. Yep. And let's see, Carolyn Monroe, who's a very beautiful woman, was they called her Dia. They left the N off, and I have no idea why. But she was Dia the Beautiful in this movie, and she certainly looks the part. They also changed Ja to Ra, so they made some apparently random name changes in a couple of cases. But the movie kind of, in general, follows the plot of the book. They leave a lot of stuff out. I think they refer to Pellucidar as a series of caverns because the sets they had couldn't make the weird horizon. And they don't mention the flow of time being weird. They don't deal with that at all. But in many ways, it follows the books fairly closely. The monsters are mostly men in suits, but they look kind of cool. And we do see a fight between two strange-looking bipedal creatures near the beginning of the movie, which look like they're straight out of the book Where the Wild Things Are, the old children's book. But it's a fun movie. Kind of despite the low budget, it still looks fun. It's well acted, and it has a script that respects the original material.
I did like the design or makeup they used for the original monkey humanoids.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was an interesting look on it. But I noticed they also kind of made everything centered around the original Mayhar city. And if you see maps, Pellucidar and stuff, there's a larger population of other cities out there. But they kind of, because when he came back and watched the sacrifice or dance of death type thing, when they feasted on him in the pool, it looked like they were back in the same fortress. And so many things took place all around that cavern or labyrinth fortress they were in to kind of compartmentalize the whole story in that area before they're able to, if you want to call it, happily leave at the end of the at the end of the movie. They didn't go out onto the ocean or to the other islands, or the budget obviously was prohibitive for that. But I'm still really glad to have the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for those movies too, and I don't think this would ever be done due to budget or maybe licensing restrictions, but it would be so neat. And I'm not big on special effects, as I've stated often, but I'll say it anyhow. It would be neat if they could take that film, leave the dialogue, leave everything as it is, but replace the special effects with something more current. I think that film would find new life and perhaps even a new audience.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true because the cast is fine. They do handle the ending a little differently. In the book, Diane was anxious to go back to the surface with David, and just doesn't because of Hoja's machinations. In the movie, he wants to bring her with him and marry her, but she just has this random, no, this is my world and that's your world and we can never be together. And he and Abner go back to the surface without her. And it kind of like kills any chance of a sequel. Not that they ever made one, but it was kind of an interesting, kind of a weird change to make.
I think At the Earth's Core or Pellucidar as a series really, and I've seen this where we, like on the sequel to Tarzan Facebook page and stuff, would there be a possibility that Pellucidar just begs to be made as an ERB movie because of what we can do with special effects now, which then could lead to Tarzan visiting the Earth's core from that novel, and then bringing Tarzan and the Pellucidar science fiction groups all together. At least those are my wishes.
Mm-hmm. That would be cool.
Every time I see a Jurassic Park film, I immediately think either Pellucidar or Land of the Time Forgot. Either way, the technology's there to demonstrate it and present it very, very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be. As much as this movie, as fun as this movie is, a remake or whatever with modern effects to show dinosaurs would be epically cool. It really would be. Provided the script is faithful to Burroughs.
Right.
Yeah. So
other films with drilling machines going deep inside the earth. I think one was entitled The Core. So we've seen that on film, and those were popular. So Gee Whiz Burroughs was there first.
Yeah, he was there first in most things. That's the hard thing about making a movie based on Burroughs nowadays, is that a lot of people don't realize that he was first in so many things, and they see the movie and they think, oh, they're just copying other stuff, you know.
Right.
So I think it might make some of his works a marketing challenge to larger audiences. Then. Jess, you had earlier mentioned the Jamie Chase's novel, a graphic novel version,
right?
Which I just want to once again say was faithful and had that excellent artwork, and is really well worth getting.
I'd like to add on to that too. I do love the both Bobby Nash did the
script
adaptation text for it. Jamie Chase did the artwork. They're about 35 pages into it. If anyone has a book and they want to look at it again, or they're thinking of getting it, I think it's about 35 pages in. There's a double-page spread where they're coming out and seeing the world that it is with what we would call brachiosaurs or brontosaurus and pterodactyls and the sagoths, ape-men, taking them along by the water and crocodile creatures and stuff. It's just magnificent. Jamie Chase's art has that. He works in shapes and you'll see in shapes many times in block shapes and how he it's not abstract, it's not impressionistic, but he works with how our mind's eye sees scenes or people or faces. It's not the detail of photographic painting, but it's the detail that impresses upon you. When you see something, you automatically recognize what it is, and it's never, rarely static looking. It's all, you can see movement or life in it. But along those lines, I also reread this last week, the Dark Horse release of the DC Pellucidar at the Earth's Core adaptation from the 1970s, in which Len Wein and Dennis O'Neill did the writing, and the artists were Ellen Weiss, Michael Kaluta, and Dan Green for different portions over an approximate half a year or a year of issues of Korak and backup features and weird worlds that DC put out. And it's a little more in-depth and a little more detailed, not quite as streamlined as the At the Earth's Core we were originally talking about. But the last couple of adaptations or chapters in this seem to be, which Denny O'Neill did, seem to be more of a chapter or compressed version, actually going into Pellucidar and part of the story there to tie it in, to try and make, maybe they knew they were being canceled or something, kind of wrap the whole story of David Ennis and Diane and their life together in Pellucidar. And it's a collection anthology well worth getting to.
Yeah. The other instances I can think of comic book adaptations or comic book stories set in Pellucidar was in the 90s when Dark Horse was doing Tarzan. They did a Tarzan versus Predator at the Earth's Core, which actually turned out to be a lot better than I thought it would. It sounded contrived when it was announced, but I gave it a try. It had Walt Simonson artwork, I think, and it looked magnificent and was actually a really well done story. So
Jason Gridley makes an appearance in that story also, as I recall.
He does, yeah. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. I thought they were trying to cram too much stuff together, but it made internal sense, and it looked good, and I thought they presented Tarzan well within character, and I just enjoyed it enormously.
Tarzan wins.
Yeah, and in the 70s, I think when Marvel briefly had the rights to Tarzan, they did a 7-part story where Tarzan and some other allies go through a portal that zaps them back down into Pellucidar, and had it was really quite a good story there. Sal Buscema did at least the art for at least a few of the issues, and it was a good story, and it looks really nice.
And while we're talking comics, I don't think I've mentioned, and even if I have, it bears repeating, American Mythology has done comics over several of Burroughs' worlds, including Venus and also the Moon, Vana, and even pulled in John Carter as the Warlord of Mars. They've also included Pellucidar in that, so there's 3 or 4 comics with Pellucidar-themed stories, which I would recommend all of them. One of them involves a new character, a young lady by the name of Sita, and they're all well-written stories. Recommend them.
They're very nicely done.
Yeah, and Jess, you had earlier mentioned the webcomic written by Chuck Dixon, and I'm sorry I'm blanking at the artist, but it really is a great comic strip. It may be my favorite amongst the Burroughs webcomics that are current now.
Yeah, indeed. It's one of those that of course, I read several of them regularly, but it's certainly one that I go to. As I said, the young fella Daniel and his pet Sabretooth. are especially intriguing. I always like to see what they're up to. And I will say that the artist, I think it's Gary Kwapsi. I may be butchering that name. Forgive me if I am. The artist there really does some fine work throughout the Pellucidar webcomic, and especially in regards to that saber-toothed tiger. He's put that animal in some strange and humorous poses. And it really adds a special element.
Yeah. And there's a tradition in Burroughs stories of having cool pets. You know, there was Willa the Cowlet, there was the Golden Lion. David Ennis had a hyena Don pet in one of the novels, didn't he?
Raja.
Yeah. Van Horst had the mammoth. So Burroughs loved giving unusual pets to his heroes, and it was always fun.
The artist I'm looking at up right now I was right, Gary Kwapsis, and I'll spell that Kwapizz, Kwapizz, and forgive me because I know I'm mispronouncing it, but he does extraordinary work. Chuck Dixon, of course, is a fine writer. I do recommend Pellucidar ERB webcomic.
Yeah, I love Chuck's work when he worked for DC Comics some years ago. He was one of the few writers I still followed in superhero comics at that time.
Yeah, he drew me back into the Robin series. He was writing, and then the issues Tom Grummett did the artwork, and they were. I never expected in the '90s and at the age I was at the time to be buying a Robin comic book, but it was compelling stories. They were fantastic.
Yeah, he is a great writer, and I'm glad the Burroughs people got him for one of their strips. So let's see. We should probably bring this to an end before we drive our listeners insane, wondering how long we're going to go. So
there is no time element when we're talking about.
That's true. That's true. People will listen to this for an hour and a half and realize only 10 minutes have gone by in real life. So I think next time we were talking about doing Mastermind of Mars, right? If you guys are still okay with that.
I think that'd be excellent.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll return. I think we're hoping for September as a date to record our next one. September of 2019. If you're listening to this in the future, we're recording it in late July 2019. So we will be discussing Mastermind of Mars. So once again, I am Tim Deforest. My blog is Comics, Old Time Radio, and other cool stuff. And you can also check my Amazon.com page, authors page, and buy my books and make me rich. Anything you guys want to plug again before we sign off?
Well, I've got to put a plug in then for the Facebook discussion group for the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs with yours truly and Lila Pop talking Edgar Rice Burroughs. Drop in and join the group and join the discussions and the fun.
And I just want to say, what Chris was talking about earlier, the new books and books that have come out the last couple of years that are licensed by ERB and recognized as legitimate books are well worth getting. There's been some, after, if you want to call it a drought, for many years, the last half dozen years or so have produced some excellent ERB continuations and adventures. Please support them so we continue to get more like that.
Yeah, and I agree. We're in kind of an ERB golden age in a sense here, and we should all be taking advantage of that. So,
well said.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you as always, guys. Thank you for participating in this. We'll be keeping in touch to get the next podcast scheduled when we can. Enjoy. Jess, you're probably going to the Dum Dum?
I am indeed. Loading up the hole and taking off tomorrow for Points West.
Okay, well, have fun with that. I hope to be able to attend one of those one days. And so once again, everybody who's been listening to this, thank you so much. Thank you once more to Chris for coming on board and letting us know what was going on with Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated. And you'll be hearing from us all again soon. Thank you.